Hey fam. So we're back for my what is emerging to be my favorite segment of this show, which is our VS book club, VS Gets Lit book club feature. And it is my legit great honor and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Ebony McGee. I have looked up to Dr. McGee for many years and even got to walk the same earth at Vanderbilt for a little while. But it is my absolute pleasure to introduce her for her book, Black, Brown, and Bruised, how racialized STEM education stifles innovation, with a beautiful cover. So I just want to give her a quick bio introduction and then we will get right into it. So please indulge me, Dr. McGee. So Dr. McGee is an associate professor of diversity and STEM education at Vanderbilt's Peabody College. And she investigates what it means to be racially marginalized while minoritized in the context of learning and achieving in STEM higher education and in the STEM professions. She studies racialized experiences and racial stereotypes that adversely affect education and career trajectories of underrepresented groups of color. One of the things that I admire most, I could go on and on with her bio. One of the things I admire most is that Dr. McGee is also an engineer. This is her second career. She was an electrical engineering PhD and did mathematics education. She's done all kinds of work in all kinds of institutions, including winning a grip of money so to study this very important work. So let me just, without further ado, welcome you, Dr. Ebony McGee, to Vanguard STEM and On the Vanguard.
Thank you. Wow, you just have great energy, and I loved hearing about your work. I want to make one update, and I should have told you this. I actually am a full professor now.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Let us correct. I am so sorry. Woo!
Okay, I forgot to mention it. The reason why I haven't been blowing it up is because Black women, we are really going through something in the academy.
Yeah.
And although I am really proud of my accomplishment, I know it fails in comparison to how many full Black women professors that we should have.
Yeah.
So it's kind of bittersweet for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just are we still doing pioneerism in 2021, y'all? Like for real, for real?
Listen, it's so old. It's so old. It's I really appreciate that. You listen, let's just jump right in. I really appreciate you saying that. Number one, because, as a person for whom people have used those same pioneering languages, I'm like, y'all know this is not a compliment. Like, it's not a compliment when you say this. And in fact, we know it's not a compliment because institutions generally don't broadcast it because they know it makes them look real bad. So I'm totally with you on that. On the other hand, coming up, sort of like following your lead, both in terms of just like reading your work, which is incredible, but also like watching how it's done in the field, it really did make my heart skip a beat when you said full professor because there are so few. So like I am cognizant of the troubling parts of it, but it's still so good to see you shine. It's so good to see you shine.
I I I am grateful, but like my girl Simone Biles had to do all them quadruple flips and stuff. Like that was my life. That
Right.
was my life for both tenure and promotion. And like what I talk about in my book, there's a cost to success
Yes.
when you are in a marginalized and minoritized social structure, right?
Yes.
So even though I made it to full, I wonder how many minutes, days, or years
Yep.
been taken off of my life
Yep.
due to the unending emotional labor,
Yep.
and mental and physical just weathering that took place within this process.
And knowing that like there's just there's not necessarily a way to get that back. I think that's one of the other untruths that we tell and are told is that like, oh well, after tenure or after promotion I'm gonna do, and it's like them telomeres, they don't stay as long as they were when we were starting. And so I think that's very real and very true. And I think honestly, when you talk about, so let me just say this, your book is fantastic and incredible, and I'm so thankful that you wrote it. So maybe before we dive in to the very real contents, could you just tell us not just about knowing about your becoming a full professor and sort of the cost of that is important too, but tell us how you got here. You mentioned that you were in engineering and now you're doing education. Talk to us about that transition. I feel like I might be able to answer for you, but tell us how you got here.
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's and master's in electrical and industrial, respectively. And my master's was funded by a Fortune 50 company that I went to go work for after completing my master's degree. So it was kind of like pet to threat. So when you first come into the workplace, you're very welcome. They want to put you on the cover of the magazine to show that they have diversity, but it's really just like undercover tokenism. So I experienced that. And then when the fanfare kind of wore off, and they began to be very critical of me for the same things that they celebrated for me for. So it's okay if I went to a HBCU in the newsletter, but now you're saying HBCUs don't do as well, and here's a test. So, it was just that. And I didn't have the language at the time to really understand what was going on with me, because even at my wonderful, glorious HBCU, North Carolina A&T State University, I was told as a byproduct of STEM culture that those classes in African American studies and cultural psychology, those classes don't matter, right? And I know psychology is a science, but somehow when you put the word cultural in front of it, it just like becomes something, very, very different.
Right.
So I didn't really have the language to understand that what happened to me is structural. I was experiencing racial battle fatigue. I blamed myself. I had thoughts of imposter syndrome, which now I know is just a camouflage for just racism.
Just plain old racism. Yep.
I know racism. And, I was feeling really depressed. So after I got laid off, so this is the part of the CV that you don't see. My life is like this, and my CV is like, boo, right? I decided, after I picked myself off the floor and was just so, devastated, to just kind of reinvent myself. And I said, well, I would like to study people like me, folks who did really good in school, majored in STEM, and then got to work or maybe got into a doctoral program and like something happened. And now they don't even, not only do they not do STEM, may have graduated in STEM, but don't do STEM now. They don't even want to come to homecoming. They don't want to walk past an engineering building. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
So that is what I sought out to do.
I'm so glad that you did that. And, so many things about what you said stick out to me. The pet versus threat, like, oh my goodness, how many times, like,
Exactly.
it feels like its own cycle of like, oh yeah, that looks real cute over there. But when I get up close, when you say you're a free Black woman, you mean that. And that makes me uncomfortable. Like that, I have all kinds of feelings about that. But I think the thing that like I really love about this is pointing out that like you didn't have the language because it wasn't part of what the educational like canon look like. And you're right, that's true everywhere, right? And thinking about how much of a disadvantage it places us at to not know that there is language for all of this. And I have a very similar story. I remember thinking like I feel like I am failing even though I'm clearly on paper excelling, and I didn't know how to address any of that. And I remember for me the thing that made it clear was first reading that word intersectionality in graduate school. I just had never heard anything like that. I had never heard anybody be able to simultaneously address me being Black and me being a woman at the same time. And it like set me free and set me on fire and made it so that I was like, oh, well, so other people are talking about this. Like there's a whole area. And so, I really appreciate that. And for you to have gone the extra step to like turn and look at it in a very intentional way, such that we get to this is really truly amazing. And so, when we're in this book and we're reading it, did you want to write it for like yourself? Like I know you wanted to research folks like you, but did you want to write it for like your next generation to read it? Like who did you want to really come away with the gems from this book?
So I want underrepresented, marginalized, minoritized folks that look like me to understand They are not crazy.
Mhm.
There is nothing wrong with them.
Mhm.
Never been anything wrong with them,
Mhm.
their ancestors, everybody else. This is a structure that we have to exist in. So the things that we feel and the things that we experience are valid, they are true. And particularly in STEM, where we say everything's innocent, we're all neutral, we're not
Trash.
political here, universal, objective, right? So you are socialized into this, myth that continues to perpetuate itself, in every way it's telling you it's mythical. But,
Mhm.
sometimes, going through K to 12 schooling and post-secondary, you're sipping the Kool-Aid.
Mhm.
Like, you may not be gulping it, right? You may be
Right.
critical, but
Yeah.
you're still sipping. And
Yeah.
so it does kind of seep in. So I had to really retrain myself. And what I'm asking the students of color to do is to do that as well,
Mhm.
to understand the structures, because if you understand the structures of racism, you will understand the outcomes, like the microaggressions. That's an outcome, right?
Mhm.
The end product is the structures. And remember, the structures are in the air.
Right.
It's in our policies, it's in our ideologies, it's in our founding. Like, first mathematics course was taught in 1726. Guess what our people were doing, right? We were enslaved,
Right.
even if you go to 1962 with the first computer science course, we was Jim Crow, right? We couldn't even
Yeah.
go in those schools.
Yeah.
So, we just can't pretend that that foundation doesn't still exist. And
Mhm.
there's a heavy residue. Many fields have like had a come to reckoning moment, have even apologized. Like you got statistics built off of eugenicists,
Right.
the whole field of psychology, Lord had mercy, and
Right.
so many other things.
Mhm.
And it's just like the STEM community, we still neutral, like we still there. And the other constituent that I wanted to read the book are, white males and some Asian males at the top.
Mhm.
Like, you can no longer say you unconscious,
Right.
right? As we focus on implicit bias, like we just got to talk about just like plain old bias, right?
Right.
In what ways are you constructing or co-constructing an atmosphere, an environment, a curriculum, a discipline that um, not only pushes us out, but is not even made to come in the
Right.
first place, right?
Right.
You
Right.
know, and
Right.
tell us that we have to leave our cultures, we have to leave our racial identities,
Mhm.
we have to somehow assimilate. And, this is the message: as long as you do good in STEM, everything will be all right. Well, we know that's not true.
Why?
Charles Drew did good in STEM. Like he founded the blood bank. Guess what? They didn't even want his blood. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Benjamin Banneker, now we know that he is the one who actually discovered that cicadas come out every 17 years. But
I'm
what
not so sure. I wish they didn't, but continue.
I know, but what did Thomas Jefferson do? He buried that. He did not want to celebrate or even acknowledge the contribution, right? And when you look at the Nobel laureates
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
medicine, physiology, many, many STEM areas,
Yeah.
no Black Nobel Prize winner in its 61 or 62-year history. Like,
Yeah.
why would anybody want to be in a field that looked like that, where the top of the top look like that?
Right.
We can't even get our great dead Black scientists up in there, right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, we
Mhm.
can't even we can't even get dead, our dead great in there. Just
Right.
imagine,
Right.
you or me trying to be part of that. So
No.
that was a long answer, but
No, no, no. I appreciate it. I appreciate there's a lot there and there's a lot to talk about. And I think surfacing these stories of what actually is success versus what is regarded as success is incredibly important, right? Like, so I'm really glad that you did that. And I think it's also really, I'm just going to go back and underscore some of the things that I think we should just, continuously talk about, which is, that ultimately just doing what the person before you did, particularly for folks in leadership and who have power in departments and in institutions, is actually continuing to make a problem. There's no like neutral stance. I like to think about it as like it's a metastable state. You can't stay there, right? Like you cannot stay there. And so thinking about that and thinking like that there are two audiences for this book, both of whom would benefit from understanding structural problems. And I think one, like you say, one group, those that are moving through it, can realize that this is not you, it's the air you breathe. And one group can be like, you are polluting the air. Right? I think that like it's a really important set of works. And we part of the episode that we're in is about this paper that we just wrote, talking about basically doing science without assimilation, which as we talked before, I sort of think about it as like the little sister to your work, that like ultimately we have great ideas, the way that we are scientifically expert, right? So we have that down, and we also have that added sort of like experiential and cultural wisdom, that is often, as you pointed out, we are encouraged to drop it at the door, but more and more we're realizing that not only should we not, but we can. And that gets to the second part of your book, that it's actually stifles education. And you spend a lot of time clarifying that it's not that, oh, it's just a feel good thing. It's like, actually, like there are really good ideas that folks will never get to say, or will have to say in different ways, or will have to go through many years of therapy before they can say, because of their experiences. And one of the things that I really wanted to like point out, because it blew me away, there are actually two things, but the thing that got me right now is thinking about mentoring, right? So in Vanguard STEM, we do a lot of mentoring. We think it's really important, but we also try to keep in mind that like mentoring individual people is super important. Even programs that mentor a lot of people are super important. But if you're mentoring folks to just learn how to live in a broken system, that's first of all not good for them, and also it doesn't fix a structural problem. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because I know you have a section in your book about like um both the benefits and the limits of mentoring.
Yes. I really, really resonate with what you're saying. And, at the end of every PowerPoint, people say, okay, so give me about 5 things that I can do to change my department, et cetera, et cetera. We need a revolution. Your department needs to be completely dismantled and rebuilt with people of color leading the way.
Mhm.
Otherwise, sometimes what we are suggesting is going to be slightly controversial. Dr. Amos Wilson said, we certainly don't want to put a black face on white power, right?
Right.
Yeah. So now we have black leadership, but it is still in a white supremacist context. So, I just always keep that in mind, because, I need to check myself, right? I too am not immune from that. But in terms of mentoring, I'll just say first, so mentoring often, particularly in STEM, often enables this construct called grit.
Mhm.
The old school word used to be resilience.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Mhm.
basically, teaching you how to internally build up momentum and motivation to persevere in a field that was founded against you, enslaved you. All right. The slave ships, an engineer built those,
Right.
right? Okay. So let's just go there. Like historically was not made for you to even exist.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we want to layer a mentoring program on top of that. And then the mentoring program serve as our diversity, equity, inclusion. I don't care how resilient
Mhm.
any minoritized person is, you cannot be so resilient against structural racism. You
Right.
simply can't. And for people to ask you to do that is really just asking you to be in a form of continual oppression.
Yeah.
So let me say this again. Asking someone to be gritty or resilient without proper and unique external supports, like something outside of me, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Is
Mhm.
really asking folks to be in a constant state of oppression.
Yes.
And we don't want that
We don't.
for our Black and brown, you know, babies, and our souls. We don't want that.
We don't.
So mentoring programs can do a lot. I think it's really important. I'm a pragmatic while I'm also a revolutionist.
Mm-hmm.
While the revolution is brewing, and it is brewing, sis, know this. There's folks in here now and look, I'm down for the revolution, but I got to get out now. So, my pragmatic approach is to have a race conscious and race gender conscious, programming to say, these are the structures that you have to exist in. They are not fair. We are fighting to dismantle these structures. But in the meantime, here are some things that you can do to cope.
Yep.
Why do I say cope and not heal?
Yep.
Because structural racism is still in the air,
Yes.
right? Right. So we need a societal healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hate it when people think, just do your favorite yoga pose, breathe in the mirror, say affirmations. And somehow if that doesn't work, it's your fault. Because
The reason why I'm laughing is because I wrote it down in my notes. I was like, I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet from you that was like, yoga is not going to solve 400 years of slavery and oppression. And I hollered.
Neither is mentoring.
Exactly, right. And I wanted to make sure that we said that, because all of these things that again point to individual action completely obscure, like you were talking about, these structural issues. And so I just really wanted to hear you as an expert talk about that. And maybe, guys, I want to be mindful of your time. And maybe as we're closing, let me ask you this, because it really resonates with me, as we talked about earlier, this point that like you didn't have the language when you were going through it. And so you basically were like, okay, first of all, I'm out, but also here's what I want to go and get into and figure out. And I want to tie that to effectively, like, how can we surface not just the cultural psychology, not just the social psychology and cultural studies, but also this particular lane of STEM education researcher, right? Like, people have to know that that exists, that there are folks doing really important work there, and that there also is a particular language that can be gleaned and understood to really sort of like protect ourselves from what is happening. So talk to me about like that area and why it's important to really like highlight and center work coming from STEM education researchers.
This is such a pertinent question. I am so glad you did not end this discussion without me talking about that, because STEM education researchers, not STEM faculty who do research in STEM, but those who span the work of sociology, psychology, anthropology, education, educational psychology, et cetera, right? Even economics. We are considered the evil stepchilds of STEM, right? We are very marginalized. You will see very few engineering educators in engineering departments. They're often in ed, and even if they're there, they're just like, okay, we got you there, bye. So there's not a lot of cross-pollination between what's happening in STEM classrooms and how STEM educators are unearthing what's happening, right? So we certainly need to get STEM educators to be seen and valued within STEM, right? And it's because our N is not, 2,506, that sometimes, because we don't quantify everything, you see what I'm saying? Because, STEM, we love, we're this actuated with these numbers, right? It's all about the numbers. They don't get the benefit of what we can bring, to improve their teaching or their scholarship or be a better mentor or a better advisor. And mentor and advisor is not the same thing.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that next time.
Not even a little bit.
And just so many things that they are the gatekeepers of, that we can actually, teach you how to better advocate for people that look like me. But it's just, I have even been told that I am not necessary. I am not necessary in engineering department. So we certainly have to bring to prominence. And I thought, oh, well, I got electrical engineering degree. They're going to let me in. They were like, okay, you know what? We're going to crack the door for you.
Yeah.
And keep your head in, doing Black History Month or whatever. But after that, go away. So But I mean, we are here for you. We want to improve not only the social conditions. I just don't want to solve race and racism.
Right.
I want to fly in my car.
Right.
We are all missing out, like today. And I'm not talking about the 6 billionaires who do fly in their car.
No, that's not
Yeah,
the same.
we are all missing out on innovation and the creativity, the where we should be. We are stagnant. You know, since the 1970s, our innovation is drastically reduced. And I truly believe it's because you are only dealing with a small portion of society when it comes to STEM innovation. Like, why is there no people of color automobile company?
Listen.
Right? If you wanted to do all things, you know, folks of color for a couple of days, you couldn't drive, you couldn't get on a plane, you couldn't even get no gas, bicycle. I mean, just like, let's just go down the list, right? And we often like to talk about, you know, how we give season into Black Twitter. Well, where's our Twitter? You know, Twitter's still owned by white, you know, middle class, well, upper middle class.
Right. You know,
yes, maybe atheists or Christian, like, you know, that whole demographic typology. And we're just not in there. It's a shame. It's a shame for our entire country, not just for folks of color.
And you know what? I agree with you, Ebony. And honestly, I 100% agree. And I think the thing that I would add is not just that we're missing out, which is true, but also it is a matter of just straight up freedom, right? Like the freedom to decide that you want to pursue this thing that is really interesting to you because you just want to, which is what a lot of folks who come from majority backgrounds or dominant class backgrounds do. I have a question and I want to answer it. And so the fact that we are being driven out or discouraged before we even get started from doing that is also a matter of freedom. So, you know, I 100% agree. And I can see right now that we're just going to have you come on the show. Like, it's cute to have you on for your book. We want that, but we need an hour to talk through.
Can I just say one thing to your point?
Yes.
Is so critical, because really the innovation and invention thing that, you know, we could be doing great things is a really capitalistic ideology. But, you know, I used to say it because I figured, well, you know, wouldn't Google want to be a richer Google? No, they don't. Like, you know, white supremacy trumps innovation. So, you know, that whole mantra, I don't even do it anymore. But I mean, it still boggles me that why as a U.S. citizens cut our foot off, you know, so we can have a white supremacist context. Certainly, we should have STEM education to be better, so spaces and places won't, you know, foster anti-Blackness, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, if nobody cares about innovation, they care even less about spaces being anti-Black.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, now, I mean, if one stinks, right? Like, if ending white supremacy stinks, then like making other folks feel like humans, that, I mean, now you're just like really poisoning people, right? Like, so
way too much now.
Exactly. No, seriously, Ebony, we're gonna have you on an actual episode so we can dive in, because I mean, there are so many things I just want to talk about with you, but like, I want to make sure that we are making clear we have now talked about who this book is for. Black, Brown, Bruised, How Racialized STEM Education Stifles Innovation by Dr. Ebony McGee. This is for you if you consider yourself a student of color, a person of color trying to move through these STEM streets. It's also for you who are in power and in control at these institutions, at the departments, at labs. Everybody needs to read this book. Ebony is an expert and she knows what she's talking about. She has put in the work both experientially and she has also gotten all the degrees. So you need to listen. But we are honored to have you as our feature book club this month. It's a privilege, truly, I mean it. Like, just knowing that I got to spend some time on the same campus with you. You did not know this. I didn't tell you this, but like, just having you there and knowing that you were there doing this good work made me feel more comfortable when I was there. So just thank you for the work that you're doing. We will definitely have to have you back on the show because clearly we have things to talk about.
We could have did at least another couple of hours, sis.
Yeah, listen. Okay, so promise on record that you'll come back. Good, good,
Absolutely.
good. And in the meantime, we're gonna hype your book. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in. We'll see you next time for On the Vanguard. Bye, y'all.
Yay.